Chapter 2272, Ruination. Chapter 2272. Ruination. An area formed by the Great Path had appeared around the Millet Emperor. It was as if an ancient divine gate from the past was now being summoned, surging toward the ground below. The watchtower continued to expand, until a divine gate capable of suppressing the world emerged from it. It crashed through the ground, and revealed itself to be the gate of the world, capable of suppressing all the forces in the world. The divine fire that gushed from beneath the ground could not melt away the gate of the world, and the world beneath the ground was cut off. The cultivator from Sun God Mountain instantly began to wilt. Unable to leverage the power from under the ground, his momentum was clearly not as strong as before. The situation in which Renhuang was being suppressed was rapidly reversing. Boom! A terrifying divine power rocked the godlike body as it burst out, smashing the solar divine palace inside the divine flames. Those eyes glanced at the Millet Emperor in the sky below, knowing full well that it was him who suppressed the power underneath the ground. Now his power was blocked, and he was being repelled. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't easy to contend with the others just on the strength of a single person. It seemed that it was an impossible task after all. The terrible rumbling sound came out, and the space around him had been transformed into a starry sky world. It was as if he was in the absolute domain of the starry Great Path. The starry sky world was full of shining bright stars that sprinkled down their radiant divine light. The starlight was like countless lines that connected these stars, forming a horrific starry sky matrix. Renhuang floated in the air, as if to become one with the starry sky. It seemed as if he was the master of this starry sky world. He held the scepter in his hand as his blue robe fluttered in the wind. There was an unfathomable aura coming from him. It was incomparably sacred. The cultivator from Sun God Mountain knew very well that the others wanted to keep him here to finish him. In another direction, the Millet Emperor was walking this way, still carrying Wangshan Watchtower on his back. It was difficult for him to fight against the man who had borrowed the power from the underground. But now, with that source of power shut off, he who carried the watchtower was absolutely qualified to participate in the battle. Not to mention that they had Renhuang on their side. The cultivator from Sun God Mountain looked at the two, knowing that they wanted nothing more than to detain him here permanently, in this land of the original realm, and kill him once and for all. In the other direction below, where Futian and the others were, the cultivators from Solar Divine Palace met their miserable end. Many were killed by that powerful cultivator from Sun God Mountain. The divine fire he summoned had burned many people to death. The layout of the field had prevented them from escaping. Everyone who was still alive was at the Renhuang level. However, at this moment, there was nothing but desperation and hopelessness in their hearts. Solar Divine Palace is willing to submit to Heavenly Mandate Academy, a voice from below said. It came from a cultivator of the Solar Divine Palace. But Futian did nothing except glance indifferently toward the sky below, thinking, now they are willing to submit? He had given them a chance before, but the Solar Divine Palace did not take it. Only when they were in dire strait, as they were now, did they think of surrendering. But unfortunately, they had overestimated his generosity. The Heavenly Mandate Academy is not recruiting right now, Futian replied indifferently, and the cultivator in the sky below paled instantly, as a feeling of desperation crept up on him. Boom! Next to Futian, many top figures started to move downward as a collective horrific aura burst out from them, suppressing the cultivators from the Solar Divine Palace. There was extremely tyrannical murderous intent upon all of them. At this moment, the Solar Divine Palace understood that the end was upon them. They were finished. The battle afterward was one-sided. Without any doubts, every cultivator from Solar Divine Palace was slaughtered, one after another. Under such absolute and domineering power, there was no way for them to fight back. Thus, on this day, this most powerful principality in the solar realm had been wiped out. The truth was that the Solar Divine Palace had the same chance as the Shen clan and the Golden Divine Nation to save themselves. At the very least, they wouldn't have ended up like this, but they had been used and sacrificed by their own people. On another battlefield, The stars that surrounded the man from Sun God Mountain suddenly shot out many rays of starry divine lights. And these divine lights now turned into starry divine swords, crossing heavens and earth, trying to destroy this side of the space. It had shut off all the escape routes, leaving nowhere to go. Once anybody was hit by any one of these swords, there would be nothing left. These attacks came in an instant, and when that cultivator from Sun God Mountain saw this, that godlike body started to burn. It was as if he was transformed into a blazing sun. Then, with his body as the center, a terrifying solar storm manifested to destroy everything. The divine glory of the sun spilled out, and the space was burning. When those destructive starry divine swords came in front of him, they entered into an absolutely powerful field. Those swords took on the color of fire and began to melt. By the time they got to him, they had already melted into nothingness. An existence that had been through the divine tribulation of the great path was frightening enough, for it had already come infinitely closer to the origin of the way. Nevertheless, it would not be so easy to kill him. At this time, the large starry matrix that surrounded them gathered into one point, and that was where Ren Huangchen appeared. He extended the scepter in his hand, and a terrible rumbling sound was heard. Suddenly, starlight seemed to fall from somewhere outside the firmament. It was as if they were summoned here to bestow the divine glory. At this moment, the endless and vast area of the solar realm turned into a starry sky world. The light of hundreds of millions of stars gathered, all flowing in the direction of Ren Huangchen, and converged upon the scepter he held. They seemed to draw on the power of the 9 heavens, summoning the power of the starry great path from somewhere outside the firmament. Even as mighty as the man who came from Sun God Mountain was, he, too, felt a strong sense of threat at this time. His eyes, burning with the divine fire of the sun, stared at the figure in the void. They held a sense of great apprehension. He wanted to get away from here. Boom! Light of the divine fire rushed straight into the sky, wanting to pierce the starry sky world and leave this area. Suddenly, the starry sky above the firmament seemed to be set ablaze, bathing in the divine fire. However, Ren Huangchen stood high above the sky. He didn't seem to be aware of it, but he continued summoning that force. If he wanted to finish off his opponent here, he must mobilize extraordinary power to unleash the fatal attack. The Millet Emperor had wanted to make a move, but was shocked by the power summoned by Ren Huangchen at this time. This power was nothing close to anything he could have produced, not even with the help of Wangshan Watchtower. After all, Ren Huangchen himself, with his scepter in hand, was already in existence who had experienced the divine tribulations. The scepter was a divine item passed down by the great emperor once upon a time, and only the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace may possess and control it. However, Yi Futian didn't claim it for himself, but handed it over to Ren Huangchen instead. Therefore, Ren Huangchen was quite partial to Yi Futian, since their trust seemed to be mutual. Outside the firmament, brilliant starlight descended and gathered on the scepter. As Ren Huangchen stretched out his hand, the scepter suddenly flew out of his hand and began to float in the air. The shape of the scepter seemed to change, as if it was transformed by all the stars in the sky until, finally, a sword emerged. In the vast starry sky world, boundless starlight converged on the sword and transformed it into a heavenly divine sword. As it was transformed by stars in the heavens, it was crushing this corner of the sky. Sword and tent flowed down one by one, and everything was suppressed in the world below. Finally, the cultivator from Sun God Mountain fixed his attention on the sword and felt the threat of death approaching. He looked at Ren Huangchen and said, "If I perish here today, all the cultivators from Sun God Mountain will come to the lower worlds to seek justice. Is this something the Heavenly Mandate Academy wants?" It seems that you had forgotten the last battle quickly. Ren Huangchen glanced at the man indifferently and continued, "Since it was you who started this war, it's only fitting that you die here, as you have proven you are not up to the task. So let's end it now." When his voice fell, Ren Huangchen pointed his finger down, and the starry divine sword penetrated heaven and earth as a loud rumbling sound was heard. The world was pierced through by the star divine sword as it came down from the firmament. Boom! That supreme existence from Sun God Mountain fought hard to resist, unleashing the sun god sword to smash and shatter everything without discrimination. The divine sun furnace attempted to melt the sword, but it was useless. This heavenly star divine sword slammed down, led by the power of the heavens and the stars, summoning powers outside of this world to gather upon this one sword. The sword struck, and the body of that cultivator from Sun God Mountain was penetrated. But then, his body disintegrated little by little until it turned into an illusion. Finally, a face was revealed in that soon-to-disappeared illusion, and it was full of reluctance and disbelief. How could he meet his end on a battlefield in the lower worlds? Bits of the flaming divine light dissipated, and a cultivator of supreme existence, someone who had survived the first divine tribulation of the Great Path, had been killed on this spot. The starry sky world disappeared as well, with many observing the battlefield from different locations in the distance. The witnesses trembled in their hearts, and were shocked beyond belief. They did not expect Ren Huangchen from the Ziwei segmentum would possess such terrifying strength. The scepter in his hand had killed an existence of the same level from Sun God Mountain, and he didn't even allow the man a chance to escape. In this battle, the entire solar divine palace was wiped out, and everyone from there was slaughtered. From this moment forward, the solar realm would be controlled in the hands of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was systematically gaining control over all of the original realm. Yi Futian witnessed everything that occurred. He walked up and said to Ren Huangchen, "Thank you, Elder. It was what I'm supposed to do. If it weren't for the Millet Emperor, who had suppressed the underground power, I probably wouldn't have been able to kill him. Most likely, I would have even been at a disadvantage. I still don't know what is underneath this ground." Ren Huangchen looked below as the Millet Emperor extended his palm toward the sky below. Instantly, rumbling sounds were heard, and the power that suppressed the underground disappeared. Suddenly, everyone perceived a majestic force surging out from the ground underneath. Hot airflow diffused towards the ground above. Very quickly, the temperature of the air became scorching hot, and even the ground appeared red hot. It was as if it had been branded by a hot iron. It has been many years since Solar Divine Palace has started the process, and then there was that cultivator from Sun God Mountain, who came here from the lower worlds. All this meant that they probably have already started channeling the power from the Earth Center, just short of finding a method to completely control or take it away. So this explains why that cultivator from Sun God Mountain was so reluctant to leave. He still wanted to use it to fight, Yi Futian reasoned in his heart. Especially when he felt that hot air current. He sensed that the man had already achieved some kind of communication with the power in the heart of the earth. Otherwise, there was no way he could have used it to fight. Everyone around him nodded in agreement. If the cultivator from Sun God Mountain could use the power of the Earth's center to fight before, it stood to reason that a channel already existed, just that there was no way to master it completely. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2273, Geocenter Storm. Chapter 2273, Geocenter Storm. The group strode down. It was not only Yi Futian's group. Many practitioners in the sky also came down. The cultivators of every faction wanted to see what was hidden inside the center of the solar realm. The formation of every one of the 9 supreme imperial realms seemed to contain a unique factor. The shadow realm had a shadow divine item. So what about the solar realm? Beneath the destroyed solar divine palace, a large gap had appeared. It was the spot where the mighty figure from the Sun God Mountain stood earlier. Scorching heat flowed out of the gap, as if lava was spewing out from it. Did we already reach the surface layer? The cultivators' hearts fluctuated. The power contained within the center affected the entire solar realm. However, it should not have been as far-fetched as the current moment. Otherwise, the solar realm would have long been turned into a world of fire. How could any life form survive? This should be caused by the solar divine palace, mumbled someone. The others nodded slightly. They also had the same guess in their minds. Otherwise, it would not have become like this. Rumble. Then the surface was burned into nothingness. The ground was melted, and the location of the solar divine palace was completely transformed into a world of fire. Figures stood in the air one after another. If they were to look down from above, they would be able to notice that a deep pit of flames had appeared within that vast area. There's a matrix. Divine light glowed from everyone's eyes. They looked down at the flames and could only see a powerful matrix deep inside the pit. The matrix looked like it had transformed into an image of the sun. Surrounding it was a solar storm that whirled continuously. The storm swirled and twisted, causing the power underneath to be devoured into the image of the sun incessantly. An extremely shocking aura burst from the image of the sun. At that moment, everyone finally understood why the divine palace was directly burned to the ground, and why the practitioners within the divine palace were burned to death. Such a powerful matrix. If it were to explode completely, even the powerful figures, not to mention the cultivators of the solar divine palace, would have to retreat for a bit, and they would not dare to touch it. Before, the cultivator from Sun God Mountain borrowed this power to extract the forces from underground, to make the power flow into his body and erupt amazing strength. Don't get close. This matrix has been running for a long time. It has been devouring the divine powers surging from below. If you get too close, I'm afraid you might be burned to a crisp, instructed Renhuang Chen in a low voice. He could clearly sense just the magnitude of the power within. If anyone were to go underground carelessly and enter the area covered by the matrix, they would likely be burned to ash. The person would not even know what killed him. Everyone stopped in their tracks. Odd expressions hung on their faces. What the current situation meant was that it was going to be difficult to enter from there. We need to destroy the matrix first. Let the divine power of the sun disperse, said a cultivator from one of the factions present. The others nodded. They had also realized this. Then, let's work together and destroy it first, suggested someone. Many people nodded in agreement. Futian glanced below and said to Renhuang Chen, "It looks like I have to trouble Elder again." Back in the day, he was able to get his hands on the power of Yin. Now his plane level was no longer comparable to back then. If he were to descend, he was confident that he was the person most likely to obtain the solar realm divine item. Okay. Renhuang Chen understood Futian's meaning. He nodded. Then, he concentrated his strength and prepared to destroy the matrix himself. While the matrix was strong, without someone controlling it, the group's powerful attacks would naturally destroy it. As Futian and the others moved aside, they could see the other cultivators converging their power of the Great Path, which later transformed into multiple frightening attacks that flew directly into the flame below. The attacks directly landed within the matrix. In an instant, the solar matrix was destroyed and disintegrated. A destructive force raged and spewed outwards. Flames spread around the area, and in an instant, everything within a radius of tens of thousands of miles had turned into scorched earth. Only after the frightening power of flame dispersed from the direction of the solar divine palace did the cultivators start walking downwards again. It seemed as if a passage towards the center had been opened there. After the matrix was destroyed, the scorching air on the surface had dispersed. However, the deeper they went, the more intense the scorching aura became. Most of those who had entered were the best of the best. They were heavyweight class existences. Before long, they had gone deep underground. As they went deeper, they quickly noticed that rocks could no longer be found around them. It had become a world of flames. It seemed like nothing else could exist in this environment. Further, they continued to venture deeper. Multiple rivers of flame seemed to flow all around this world of flame. The cultivators moved past and across them. Some of the younger Renhuangs had come along. For these Renhuangs, the further they went, the harder it became. The power of the great path of defense on their bodies was on the verge of collapsing, as they could no longer withstand further assault from the path of fire. Ack! Suddenly, an excruciating wail filled the air. Then, a gust of scorching air came into contact with a person, and the person directly burst into flames. His power of the great path had been burnt out. What's going on? Everyone looked over to where the sound came from, and saw a gust of scorching air that seemed different. The expressions on the faces of some of the more powerful cultivators changed after they sensed the power contained within. "Stop going down," said a powerful figure to the younger Renhuangs who had followed them there. "That gust of scorching air seems different. We might be getting close to the central zone," said Renhuang Chen to Yi Futian. Starry light surrounded his body as he tried to keep Yi Futian protected inside. "No need. I can sense it," said Yi Futian. Renhuang Chen glanced at him and nodded. Since Yi Futian said that, it most likely meant that he was confident. The group continued to move downward. Yi Futian's expression also became slightly solemn. It felt similar to the experience he had last time in the Shadow Realm. As they ventured deeper, the number of gusts of scorching air similar to the earlier one had increased. Even the heavyweight level existences had begun to act more cautiously. Yi Futian only knew that he could hardly walk anymore. The strength of the flame in this area had reached a level that he could almost no longer withstand. Then, at that moment, a whirling storm suddenly appeared in front of them. Inside the storm were countless gusts of those earlier scorching air. In an instant, the cultivators stopped moving and stared at the storm. It looked like a sun was right in front of them, and the storm was like a storm generated by the sun. The expressions on many of the top cultivators' faces changed. How were they going to enter? If they were to step into the storm, they were afraid that it would be too dangerous. Even heavyweight level figures could not guarantee that they would be able to enter and get out alive. Renhuang Chen also stared at the scene before him. It was no wonder the cultivators from Sun God Mountain failed to obtain the divine item from the center of the solar realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Among the cultivators who came to the Earth's center, many extraordinary figures cultivated the flaming great path. They stood before the storm and perceived the power inside, trembled before such aura. It was the source of the flaming great path. Every strand of flowing current contained divine prowess. Among the cultivators who came to the Earth's center, many extraordinary figures cultivated the flaming great path. They stood before the storm and perceived the power inside, trembled before such aura. It was the source of the flaming great path. Every strand of flowing current contained divine prowess. Dared they explore? Many people thought of the same thing, but they quickly dismissed it. They realized that it was almost impossible to accomplish the task. After all, the Solar Divine Palace had been here for years, and even the cultivator that came to the lower worlds from Sun God Mountain was unable to get to the divine item inside, despite having opened up this channel. If the cultivator from Sun God Mountain couldn't do it, how could they? Of course, divine item aside, could they enter and use its power to cultivate just like that cultivator from the Solar Divine Palace? While the cultivators were considering the consequences of going inside, some were already on the move. A major figurehead, bathed in the divine light of flames, walked directly into the storm. He was instantly obscured by the moving storm, but his vague outline could still be seen in the flaming storm. He was moving towards the core, the eye of the storm. This caused some uneasiness in other cultivators. Did they even want to try? There might be danger in the storm. Among those from the Heavenly Mandate Academy, everyone's eyes were on Yi Futian. Renhuang Chen asked, "Are you going in?" Yi Futian nodded. "It's too dangerous," said Renhuang Chen. "This storm is powerful. The strength of the flaming great path on the outer rim may equal the great path's strength of some of these top cultivators. If we insist on getting deeper inside the core, even I may not survive it. This must be the reason why that cultivator from Solar Divine Palace failed." Among the 9 supreme regions of the original realm, there are 2 realms that complemented each other, the Shadow Realm and Solar Realm. These 2 realms are somewhat similar in nature. "I have entered the core area of the Shadow Realm before," Yi Futian said to Renhuang Chen. Traces of currents flowed about him, producing a chilling sensation. When Renhuang Chen perceived this aura, his eyes sharpened a bit as he glanced at Yi Futian. It seemed that Yi Futian had a great many opportunities before he received the inheritance of Ziwei the Great. If so, he might be overthinking the whole thing, as Yi Futian himself should know his own limits much better. Since the palace lord has had a similar experience before, I won't say anything more. However, please be careful. After all, there are still some risks. Allow me to go in with you. If there is an emergency, I can be of assistance, said Ren Huangchen. Sure. Yi Futian nodded, and did not reject Ren Huangchen's thoughtfulness. He then walked forward, with Ren Huangchen and others in tow. Ren Huangchen especially was sticking to him closely. Before they had entered into the storm, Ren Huangchen vaguely detected an unusual current flowing above the surface of Yi Futian's body. This current spread towards the surroundings, and seemed to turn into invisible branches and leaves of a tree. When these currents met with the invading flaming currents, they actually swallowed them up. This made Ren Huangchen feel even more unsettled. He looked at the white-haired man in front of him, and felt that Yi Futian was more unfathomable than ever before. Boom! A violent aura of the Great Path erupted from Yi Futian's body. As his body was a body of the way, the sound of the Great Path roared from it. The divine light hovered on the surface of his body as he walked into the storm, just like that. Amazingly, even at his realm, he was not burned up by that fervently fiery flaming power of the Great Path. With him as the center, a strange phenomenon was taking place. Flames that flowed freely inside the storm now turned into a cyclone surrounding him. Gradually, it infiltrated into his body little by little, until it was completely swallowed by his body. At this moment, Ren Huangchen realized that Yi Futian had secrets that no one knew. Perhaps, the will of Ziwei the Great chose him for a reason, and it had something to do with this. Some people who had entered chose to stop here, quietly perceiving the power of the Great Path, or trying to use it to cultivate. Occasionally, some of them would continue moving forward tentatively to see where their limits might allow them to proceed. Others were moving forward persistently as well, wanting to enter deeper into the area. Yi Futian and Ren Huangchen kept moving. In this terrifying storm, the deeper they got, the darker the color of the flames. In the most inner area of the core, the color was red as blood, shocking to behold. And all the flame's energy seemed to diffuse out from that central region. As they continued moving, Yi Futian gradually slowed down as well, and more cultivators had stopped, find it difficult to move forward. They had entered an area even deeper, where it was difficult for the strongest among them to move any further. Only those who had passed the test of the Great Path Divine Tribulation dared to venture deeper. Ren Huangchen, who was following Yi Futian, felt it as well. If he went any deeper, perhaps he too would not be able to continue walking. Faint traces of imperial glory hovered around Yi Futian, and upon that body of immortal Great Path. There was also the terrifying divine light of flames that flowed about him, and his body seemed gradually being eaten away by the power of the flames. He paused briefly. Although his realm was not as strong as he was now, he remembered when he was frozen and almost lost his life in the Shadow Realm. At present, his realm had much improved, but the power of Sun God Fire was definitely no less menacing than the power of Shadow. If he couldn't bear it, the result would not be just being frozen, but being burned to cinders with no hope of ever returning. There were some unusual movements in his life palace, and the ancient tree of the world kept swaying, moving toward his limbs and muscles, protecting his indestructible physical body in case of unforeseeable circumstances. At the same time, those ancient branches turned into an invisible power that spread towards the surrounding area, as the ancient tree of the world stirred again in his life palace. At this time, Yi Futian's body seemed to have been transformed into a sacred tree. He lifted his foot and continued forward. Ren Huangchen looked at him, hesitated for a moment, then followed him forward, continuing to venture deeper into an area even closer to the core. At this time, Yi Futian's body acted like a monster. Under the gaze of Ren Huangchen, he was madly devouring the flaming currents. As they poured into his body, they seemed to be swallowed into a bottomless pit. What kind of ability is this? Ren Huangchen exclaimed secretly after witnessing this spectacular sight. It seemed that his worries were unwarranted. Inside this place, he might not be stronger than Yi Futian after all. At the moment, he was already experiencing a strong pressure, and the starry defense had begun to show signs of weakness. If he went any further, he might not be able to make it. Palace Lord, Ren Huangchen called out when he thought about this, and Yi Futian turned his head to look at him. He heard Ren Huangchen say, "I can only walk to this point." Yi Futian merely nodded but continued to walk deeper to the core inside. When he saw this, Ren Huangchen didn't know what else to say. Not only him, but the other top figures behind them sharpened their eyes as well. How was Yi Futian able to achieve this? It didn't take long before Yi Futian entered into the area around the core. The crimson flames were dark and terrifying. It was as if they could swallow people up in an instant. Under the shower of the divine light, everything in this area was on the verge of being burnt up, except for the place where Yi Futian was standing, in a small area of vacuum. Yi Futian saw the eye of the storm ahead. It looked like a crystal. One glance would make the beholder's eyes sting. Is this the solar divine stone? Yi Futian marveled secretly. This power was not any lesser than the original power of Yin. The ultimate solar fire was pure to the extreme. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2275, Consumed. Chapter 2275. Consumed. Yi Futian was continuing to advance. Outside the storm, many people could faintly make out his silhouette. Their hearts trembled violently as they wondered, was this fellow crazy? Why would he continue to advance under such circumstances? Even the giant-level figures did not dare approach the divine fire. Could it be that Yi Futian wanted to reach the eye of the storm? Even cultivators who had survived the divine tribulations of the Great Path did not dare approach the eye of the storm. Yi Futian sure had some guts to try to approach it. Nervously, the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy stared at the blurry silhouette. Under their attentive gazes, Yi Futian actually successfully made his way towards the region where the eye of the storm was. As he advanced step by step, it seemed he would reach the divine fire. The area where the divine fire blazed was the core of the entire solar realm. It contained terrifying power that was beyond anyone's imagination. However, Yi Futian had actually succeeded in approaching it. He had just become a high-level Runhuang not long ago. Was he not concerned that he would be incinerated by the divine fire? At the moment, intense rumbling sounds could be heard from Yi Futian's body. The divine light of the Great Path circled around him as the imperial glory shone. Streaks of the divine halo of the ancient tree expanded outwards and were consumed by the current of the divine fire. The menacing divine fire seemed to be able to engulf Yi Futian at any second. Soon, Yi Futian was sucked into the storm. Rumble. Wave after wave of destructive heat gushed towards Yi Futian. He knew that he was in danger. Divine light expanded outwards together with the branches of the ancient tree. The branches stretched towards the eye of the storm. However, the formless ancient tree seemed to catch on fire when it came in contact with the heat current. One could faintly make out the silhouette of the tree. Fortunately, even though the tree was bathed in divine fire, it was not reduced to ashes. Instead, the branches were still moving forward. The branches of the towering ancient tree that were on fire directly penetrated the eye of the storm. It was as though the branches wanted to wrap around it. Everyone else was shocked when they saw that the ancient tree was swallowing up the sun. However, almost simultaneously, the divine fire retaliated and surged directly into Yi Futian's body. Rumble. Yi Futian's body caught on fire instantly. It was as though he was about to be incinerated into nothingness. Yi Futian's current body was formidable. It could be considered a divine body of the Great Path, especially since his body was fortified by the will of the Great Emperor and the Life Spirit. In terms of flesh, even the top giant-level figures could not be compared to Yi Futian. However, even so, Yi Futian's body was still burning at this moment. It seemed like he was about to be consumed by the divine fire. Not only was his flesh on fire, but even his spiritual soul was on the verge of being destroyed by the blaze. Even under such circumstances, Yi Futian still did not give up. He was also not consumed and destroyed by the divine fire. The ancient tree completely enveloped the divine item of the solar realm in the eye of the storm. The ancient tree then immediately consumed it, pulling it into the life palace. It disappeared in an instant. At that moment, the surrounding flames of the way appeared to be extinguished, losing their previous destructive power. The surrounding flames of the way were constantly weakening. Gradually they calmed down. The giant-level figures on the outside all sensed this. They revealed strange expressions. The intensity of the current of flames was weakening, and it appeared to be dissipating. What was going on? They were somewhat astonished. As they looked on, the power of the entire solar storm was gradually dissipating. It seemed that it would completely vanish. What had happened? Their gazes landed on Yi Futian. Right now, Yi Futian's figure was standing there motionlessly. He was bathed in flames of the way. It was as though his body was being consumed by the flames. The crowd saw that even Yi Futian's indestructible body appeared to be burned. The various cultivators narrowed their gazes as they looked at Yi Futian. Would this peerless genius be incinerated by the flames of the way? A formless wind appeared in the space, guiding the scorching current of flames. No one knew where this wind came from. The scorching gale swept up. Yi Futian's figure had yet to dissipate. As the crowd watched, they could faintly make out strange light shining from his body. Divine halos seemed to emanate from him. He was not dead. When the crowd saw this scene, their hearts trembled. In the center of the solar storm, Yi Futian's body was actually not incinerated? Then what about the divine item at the center of the solar storm? Did Yi Futian pocket it? Yi Futian's body did not move an inch. His body kept experiencing changes. The crowd could sense that his ridiculously powerful flesh was healing gradually from being burnt. His speed of recovery was baffling. Even at their level of existence, the cultivators would most likely not recover after being corroded by the solar storm. What exactly happened to Yi Futian's body? Everyone could faintly sense that a scorching heat was emanating from his body. It was as though his body contained a terrifying aura of flame. The crowd's speculation was more or less verified. From the look of things, the divine item located at the core of the solar storm was indeed retrieved by Yi Futian. However, how did he manage to do it with his current cultivation plane? Even cultivators who had been through the divine tribulations of the Great Path could not get close to the storm, let alone retrieve the divine item. Otherwise, the Solar Divine Palace, or the super cultivator from Sun God Mountain, would have pocketed the divine item long ago. The rest of them wouldn't even have a chance to be here. Yet Yi Futian managed to do it. The cultivators from the original realm were aware that Yi Futian had pulled off a similar feat back when he was in the Shadow Realm. Countless intent gazes were fixed on Yi Futian. The secrets of his body seemed exceptionally appealing now. He possessed the flesh of Xinjia the Great Emperor, the teachings of Great Emperor Ziwei, and many other secrets. It was as though there was nothing he couldn't do. Ren Huangchun and the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy could not help but walk up behind Yi Futian. They faced the various cultivators as their cold and indifferent gazes revealed looks of warning. However, even if they did not act this way, no one dared to touch Yi Futian. After all, everyone still vividly remembered that battle. Master had appeared in the world and was undefeatable when using the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor. With that precedent, anyone who wished to attack Yi Futian had to think twice. Aside from the flow of scorching currents, the space suddenly fell silent. Yi Futian's body floated in space like a statue. He remained motionless and did not show signs of life. There was only a blazing aura emanating from within his body. No one knew what was happening to him now. At that moment, in Yi Futian's life palace, some intense changes were taking place. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Ren Huangchun and the others continued to guard the area. The flames at the center faded. The entire solar realm changed as the flames receded. Ren Huangchun and the others continued to guard the area. The flames at the center faded. The entire solar realm changed as the flames receded. The cultivators from the solar realm could sense that the earth seemed to have undergone some changes. However, the ordinary cultivators couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. Only those with more profound cultivation could sense what was happening. The solar realm would most likely be different from now on. Time trickled past. The cultivators who were gathered at the center gradually left the place. It was meaningless for them to stay around. After all, they couldn't possibly attack Futian to snatch the treasure. No one could kill him in the previous battle. Now the cultivators had to seriously consider the consequences if they wanted to lay a finger on him. Only Run Huangchun and the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy remained there. They were protecting Futian. After a long while, the aura of flame on Futian gradually subsided. In his life palace, a true world seemed to have formed. The sun and the moon both shone high in the sky while being surrounded by stars. He had finally seized control of the power of Yin, the power of the sun, and the power of the stars. Moreover, he also possessed the undying flames of the divine fire of Wudong. Futian opened his eyes, and beams of divine fire of the sun shot out from his pupils. The beams were scorching hot. His gaze seemed to be capable of burning everything he laid his eyes on. Run Huangchun and the rest noticed that Futian's temperament had changed once again. However, the changes were subtle. After all, Futian possessed many other abilities. Futian turned around and looked at the crowd. He said, "Let's go." The crowd nodded and followed him. After a while, they left the underground world and traversed up into the sky. They looked down, and all they saw was scorched earth. The flames had receded, but the ground was torched. The solar divine palace had been burnt to ashes. It now existed only in history. The solar realm also no longer contained the power of the sun. In the distance, many cultivators of the solar realm noticed that Futian and his group had emerged. All of them focused their attention on him and his group. Among the onlookers were quite a few cultivators from the major forces of the solar realm. They could tell the identities of Futian and his companions with a mere glance. The solar divine palace had been eradicated. From now on, the solar realm was also under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. If the Heavenly Mandate Academy wanted to, they could directly rule over the solar realm. However, the current solar realm seemed to have lost its value. Even the earthly divine fire had disappeared. It should have been pocketed by someone among Futian's group. Most likely, Futian himself had taken it. The local cultivators had all heard rumors of Futian pulling off a similar feat in the Shadow Realm. What he did was something that the cultivators of the Sun God Mountain failed to do. Even the other top figures had trouble approaching the divine item. Most likely, only Futian had a chance to succeed. Therefore, most of the onlookers actually speculated that Futian, who had the weakest cultivation level among his group, had taken the divine item. Futian scanned the crowd. Then, he said to his companions in a low voice, "We should not give up on the solar realm." All 9 supreme realms were part of the original realm, and were the strongest lands of cultivation. They were also the future of the original realm. Futian had decided to control the entire original realm, so he was unwilling to give up the solar realm just like that. "Who should we send here?" Lord Taishian asked. "Perhaps we can build an academy here." Futian looked at Lord Taishian and suggested. "Then, we can recruit all the talented figures in the solar realm to cultivate there. It will become a branch of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Those with exceptional performance will be sent to the Heavenly Mandate realm to further their cultivation. How about it?" "Okay, your suggestion is plausible." Lord Taishian nodded in agreement. In the distance, all the cultivators were excited when they heard Futian's words. They also had a chance to enter the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Currently, the Heavenly Mandate Academy was definitely the center of the original realm. There was no place greater than it. It was the king of the original realm. "We will further discuss this matter when we are back in the academy," Futian concluded. The rest nodded. Then they traversed space and left the solar realm. The cultivators of the solar realm stared at the scorched earth with mixed feelings. The news of Solar Divine Palace being eradicated soon spread across the 9 realms. Currently, all 9 realms were controlled by the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Hence, news traveled exceptionally fast. The news stirred up a huge commotion in the Central Emperor realm. In the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Futian and the rest had returned. Someone was reporting the updates to them in the main hall. The person reported, "All the cultivators of Celestial Worthy Temple have evacuated the place and disappeared. Many of them are now dispersed in various locations in the Imperial Realm. The Celestial Worthy Temple was supported by a superpower force. Therefore, they did not come to pledge their allegiance to the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Right now, everyone in the organization had been dismissed. Clearly, they knew that they would be in danger like the Solar Divine Palace. In reality, the reason the Solar Divine Palace was eradicated was the super cultivator from the Sun God Mountain. Otherwise, the Solar Divine Palace might have been spared from the calamity. Yi Futian nodded. The person left the hall after giving his report. The core members of Celestial Worthy Temple would most likely leave together with the people from the upper worlds and head to Celestial Worthy Mountain in the Divine Prefecture. As for the rest of the cultivators, it was meaningless for Yi Futian to hunt them down. Since he did not hunt down every single member of the Shen clan, he naturally would not do so to the members of Celestial Worthy Temple. Has the restructuring of the Central Emperor Realm forces been completed? Yi Futian asked Xiaomuyu, who was beside him. Xiaomuyu nodded and said, "It is more or less completed. Now, we have all the forces in the Central Emperor Realm under control. After the battle in the Solar Realm, we practically control every single force in the original realm, except forces from the outside worlds." Yi Futian nodded. Since they had completed marshalling all the forces in the original realm, it was time for him to unite the entire realm. After that, the outside forces would most likely not dare to attack them easily. Yi Futian mumbled. But many other realms in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path are still suffering. They are defenseless against the invasion of the outside worlds. Lord Taixian nodded in agreement and responded. Before you returned, many realms in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were attacked and seized by the Dark World. Currently, many forces from the Dark World still have control over these realms. Yi Futian nodded. He looked into the distance and said, "Issue my order to the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. From this day forth, all 3,000 realms of the Great Path are under the protection of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. If any forces run rampant and kill the innocents in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, the Heavenly Mandate Academy will surely hunt down these forces." Many people were shocked when they heard Yi Futian's words. All their gazes were fixed on him. Yi Futian actually wanted to protect the entire 3,000 realms of the Great Path? The outside forces were so powerful, and the world of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path was vast. It was plausible for the Heavenly Mandate Academy to control the 9 realms, but it would most likely be an arduous task for them to expand their protection to the entire 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It was an insanely difficult mission. However, after hesitating for a moment, the cultivators present still nodded obediently. They bowed and said, "Understood." Many cultivators turned around and prepared to leave. Lord Taixian and the other top figures also said, "We'll help to relay this message too." They were gratified by Yi Futian's order. Yi Futian was now the college chief of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. After he seized control of the 9 supreme realms, it was righteous for him to be willing to protect the entire original realm from being tormented by disasters. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2277, Undercurrent. Chapter 2277, Undercurrent. After Yi Futian issued the order, the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy went to various main realms in the Supreme Realms to spread the news. One of the realms was the Crimson Dragon Realm, where Yi Futian had cultivated before. On top of that, some cultivators began the construction of the teleportation grand matrices. The matrices would connect various main realms with the 9 realms as the center. Then more matrices would be built to connect the main realms with the smaller realms. With this, the Academy could gradually expand its influence to the entire 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Moreover, the matrices could monitor the activities that occurred in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Before Yi Futian, no one had managed such a feat before. The 9 supreme imperial realms were the upper worlds, and their superiority was unfathomable. Everyone in the lower worlds yearned to explore the 9 realms. Unfortunately, various forces in the 9 realms had always contended with one another, and they had never achieved unity before. In the past, let alone unity across all 9 realms, even forces that coexisted in the same realm were frequently fighting for dominance. However, the old era had ended. Futian and the Heavenly Mandate Academy had kicked off a new era, an era where they ruled the 9 realms. This was why they could rule the entire 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Of course, they were not doing this for authority and control. For the strongest force, this was not very significant. Everyone knew that Futian did so due to his attachment to the original realm. He did not wish for it to be invaded and destroyed. After the crisis, the lands of the original realm seemed to have calmed down. Be it the cultivators from the Dark World, the empty Divine Realm, or the Divine Prefecture, they all kept a low profile. Before this, they could rampage around the original realm and could be seen all over the 9 supreme realms. However, a superpower had formed in the original realm. No force dared to act recklessly now. Right now, Futian was cultivating in the starry cultivation court of the Ziwei segmentum. It was not just him. Many people were cultivating there. The Ziwei segmentum and the Heavenly Mandate Academy were connected. They could travel back and forth between the 2 realms at any time. This place was undoubtedly the most suitable holy land for cultivation. Hence, for the time being, they were all cultivating here. Right now, in the vast starry sky, the sound of Guqin filled the space. The sounds of the Guqin were solemn and sonorous. Futian was actually bathed in the divine halo of the imperial stars as he played. It was an almost dreamlike scene. Beside him, Luo Su quietly listened to Futian playing. As she was also an inheritor of the divine melody, Luo Su felt that Futian infused more emotion than she did when he played. Even though this was a powerful and sonorous tune, it seemed to contain a heavy sense of longing. She believed that Futian was certainly a person who had a lot of stories to tell. Futian had now become the ruler of the original realm. He was just a 7th-tier high-level Renhuang, yet he could already command the various top figures to fight for him. What sort of treatment was this? Even the proud sons and vice-chiefs of superpowers of the Divine Prefecture did not have such rallying power. Who was Futian, the person who ruled over the original realm, thinking about? At that moment, from down below, a person came towards them. When he arrived, he cast a glance at Futian, and then at the group of cultivators beside him. "What is the matter?" asked Gu Donglu, who had just finished cultivating, when he saw the person arrive. "I bring news from the original realm," replied the person. "In one of the realms, a force from the Dark World is causing trouble. This force is mighty. Even the cultivators that we sent out have not returned. This might need to be reported to the college chief for him to handle." "All right, you may leave first," replied Gu Donglu as he nodded his head slightly. The person immediately left. Gu Donglu headed up into the sky and walked up beside Futian. "Younger brother," called out Gu Donglu. Futian immediately stopped playing and asked with a smile, "Third brother, what is the matter?" "There is news from the Heavenly Mandate Academy. A force from the Dark World is causing trouble in a lower world of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. This force most likely has powerful backing," said Gu Donglu. Futian frowned. He already ruled over the 9 realms. It was impossible for the cultivators of the Dark World not to know about this. That could only mean that the other party was not afraid of this fact. "It seems that this force has powerful backing," commented Futian. Responded Gu Donglu as he nodded his head. "If the force were easy to deal with, Lord Taishian and the others in the academy would have already ordered people to handle it. However, since they sent someone to inform you, the force might have a cultivator who has survived a divine tribulation and is not easy to deal with. We might need Renhuang Chen to hold the fort." Gu Donglu clearly understood Lord Taishuan's intentions. If they could have handled it themselves, they would not have disturbed Futian while he was cultivating. "Understood." Futian nodded and said, "Third brother, please continue to cultivate here. After that I will head out." Right now, for Gu Donglu and the others, Cultivating was the most important issue at hand. In this current chaotic era, their abilities in cultivation planes were still lacking. They needed time to improve. Even if they went to the lower worlds, they would not be of much help. All right, replied Gu Donglu as he nodded his head. He then saw Yi Futian walk away. When they saw him leaving, some people followed behind him and left the space. Yi Futian found Run Huangchun, and they headed over to the Heavenly Mandate Academy through the teleportation Grand Matrix. In the academy, Yi Futian met with Lord Taixian and the others. He asked, Lord Taixian, how is the situation overall? These past few days, although the original realm appears peaceful, in reality, an undercurrent is surging. Cultivators from the Dark World and the empty Divine Realm have gradually arrived in the original realm. It might be that they are acting in the same manner as the forces of the Divine Prefecture. They are channeling more forces into the original realm. Thus, the current situation might be even more complicated than before. However, they might still be acting cautiously, as they had yet to go overboard in the 9 realms for now. Lord Taixian continued. However, in the lower worlds, there are forces which have begun to act. What value do the lower worlds hold for them? Asked Yi Futian incredulously. Although the original realm had undergone some changes, the value of the lower worlds was still relatively small, especially for the superpowers. We are not sure. However, it seems that it is related to cultivating. Many people have already lost their lives, said Lord Taixian. This force is somewhat sinister. They will probably be hard to deal with. Understood, replied Yi Futian as he nodded his head. Where are they now? Since he had already given the command to protect the original realm, he would kill anyone who acted against it. This was the first force that acted against it since he made the announcement. If he did not deal with them, his previous promise would ring hollow, and other forces would most likely follow suit. Right now, other forces were probably observing from the shadows. They were last seen in the Crimson Dragon realm. They have already traveled through quite many realms. As for where they are now, we will need to investigate once we arrive in the Crimson Dragon region, explained Lord Taixian. All right, said Yi Futian with a cold and indifferent look in his eyes. The Crimson Dragon region's main realm was the Crimson Dragon realm. He had previously cultivated there. Emperor Xia's realm was also in the Crimson Dragon region. As Yi Futian said this, his group immediately departed and headed towards the Crimson Dragon realm through the teleportation Grand Matrix. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Yi Futian and the others arrived in the palace of the Crimson Dragon realm. The Crimson Dragon Emperor personally came to welcome them. Yi Futian and the others arrived in the palace of the Crimson Dragon realm. The Crimson Dragon Emperor personally came to welcome them. When he saw the current Yi Futian, the Crimson Dragon Emperor was overwhelmed. Although they had not had many interactions, he knew everything that had happened to Yi Futian. Back in the day, Yi Futian and his brother Yu Sheng had previously cultivated in the Crimson Dragon realm for a period of time. They had even stirred up quite a storm when they entered the palace. Later on, Yi Futian followed the juniors of Crimson Dragon Emperor and ventured to the Heavenly Mandate realm to cultivate. After several decades, when Yi Futian once again returned to the Crimson Dragon realm, he returned as the college chief of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, the ruler of the 9 realms, and the person who controlled the original realm. This made him seem like some surreal figure. Crimson Dragon Emperor greeted Yi Futian as he walked forwards. The Crimson Dragon Emperor bowed and said, "Greetings, Ren Huangyi." "No need for formalities," said Yi Futian. "Crimson Dragon Emperor, do you know where the force of the Dark World is now?" Responded Crimson Dragon Emperor as he nodded his head. "We have been keeping tabs on their movements. If Ren Huangyi wishes to head over there, I will lead the way." "All right, let's head over immediately," said Yi Futian. As he said this, their group immediately departed. Their speed was breakneck. Along the way, Yi Futian asked Crimson Dragon Emperor, "What has this force done?" Crimson Dragon Emperor explained. They use people to refine life force for their own cultivation. It is an extremely evil dark art. Currently, several realms face the danger of being eliminated. Before this, the Heavenly Mandate Academy also sent people down here, but even they have not made it back alive. The other party might be an extremely powerful force in the dark world. Otherwise, they would not dare to act without restraint. This caused Yi Futian's gaze to narrow. A cold, murderous look flashed past in his eyes. They actually went to such lengths. This force had openly massacred people in the original realm, and used them to refine the life force of their own cultivation. The group traversed the sky at a rapid pace. After some time they arrived at a realm. The realm was filled with the aura of death. The entire space was dark, and there were no signs of life. The ground was littered with corpses. The scene could only be described as tragic. The scene of corpses littered across the ground shocked Yi Futian and the others greatly. Yet alone Yi Futian, even the cultivators from the lower worlds of the Heavenly Mandate realm were livid. Their gazes were filled with murderous looks. The divine light of space flashed, and in an instant, Yi Futian appeared on the ground. A woman carrying a little girl was sitting on the ground. She stared blankly at her surroundings. The eyes of the little girl were filled with terror. A few dead bodies were lying in front of them. Bring them to the Crimson Dragon realm, instructed Yi Futian. Crimson Dragon Emperor, make arrangements for all the survivors in this realm to be relocated to the Crimson Dragon realm. Understood, Ren Huangyi. Crimson Dragon Emperor nodded. He was similarly filled to the brim with anger. Murderous intent rampaged in his mind. It was too cruel. This was a living hell. Countless lives in the original realm were used by the force of the dark world for their cultivation. Almost all the cultivators in this realm had been eradicated. The situation was too tragic. Buzz. Run Huangchun unleashed a frightening will, and it expanded outwards into the distance. He said, let's locate the force of the dark world first. Otherwise, more lives will be sacrificed. Yi Futian stood up, and with a flash, he appeared beside Ren Huangchun. Starlight twinkled around Ren Huangchun, and it enveloped the group within it. The next moment starlight shone, and they disappeared. Not long after, they arrived at another realm. The aura of death also pervaded this realm. A terrifying will of death seemed to envelop the heavens and earth. The clouds of death loomed over the entire sky, covering the sun. Found them, said Ren Huangchun. He took a step forward, and the group once again shifted to another place. When they appeared again, they were in midair, looking down at the ground below. There was a huge altar set up. Towering black stone pillars surrounded the altar. On the altar sat an exotic black-robed youth. Many cultivators gathered around the altar. They seemed to be protecting the black-robed youth. From within this altar, countless shadows seemed to rush out, screaming into the distance endlessly. In the divine consciousness of Ren Huangchun and the others, they saw countless cultivators shrouded and bound by these shadows. The cultivators were swept up into the air, and then their life force was stripped and extracted from them. Their life force was channeled into the center of the altar and consumed by this youth. Bang! A frightening aura burst forth from Ren Huangchun's figure. It severed the connection between the altar and the vast world. The cultivators of this realm were immediately released. The people who were bound freed themselves. They revealed shocked looks. Down below, a few figures appeared on the stone pillars of the altar. All of them had extremely powerful cultivation. Among them, a black-robed elder had an aura so terrifying that even Ren Huangchun felt threatened. As expected, it was as Lord Taixian. The others had surmised this. There was an existence who had survived a divine tribulation of the Great Path, among the force from the dark world. This force was most likely a superpower from the dark world that had descended upon the original realm. They were using the lives of the members of the original realm to refine the life force for cultivation. The youth at the center of the altar raised his head. Menacing light of death flashed in his pupils as he stared at Yi Futian and his group. The youth's level of cultivation was very powerful. He was an 8th tier Ren Huang. His aura was unfathomable. Moreover, he was protected by the tribulation level mighty existence. One could imagine the status of the youth. This youth was most likely a direct descendant of the leader of a giant-level force in the Dark World. Its status was akin to that of the Holy Land of Taichu. "You've disturbed my cultivation," said the youth. His tone was sinister. He had only recently arrived at the original realm. It was because there were 3,000 realms of the Great Path here, so there were plenty of living beings for him to use for cultivation. There were restrictions in the Dark World, so he couldn't do as he pleased. However, he could do whatever he wanted here. Rumble. Terrifying might of the Great Path descended and pressed down from the heavens. Murderous intent flared up in Ren Huangchen's eyes as he stared at the black-robed youth. He had cultivated in the Ziwei segmentum for many years. Yet, he had never seen such a bloodthirsty cultivator like this youth. The value of human lives was insignificant in the youth's eyes. He actually used people to refine his life force for his own cultivation. The moment Ren Huangchen unleashed his might, the sky seemed to crumble. Rumbling sounds kept thundering. The stone pillars collapsed, and the altar was destroyed. The vast space became the domain of Ren Huangchen. However, at the same time, the tribulation-level elder from the Dark World force stepped forward, and a storm that struck fear in the hearts of the people around swept out. A dark aura churned in the sky. Death loomed over the vast space. Everyone was trapped in this domain of death. It was as though all the cultivators here would be slaughtered. Both of them were figures of the same level. Neither of them wanted to act recklessly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2279 Kill. Chapter 2279. Kill from afar. More and more cultivators moved closer. With a few leaps, they arrived at the altar. Futian scanned the incoming crowd. These cultivators all had strong auras. They were most likely from different forces in the Dark World. However, at this moment, they seemed to be from the same alliance. The gazes of the cultivators were fixed on Futian and his group as they unleashed their might. From this scene, Futian understood that this youth was from an overlord force in the Dark World. Its position was just like that of Ziwei Imperial Palace in the Ziwei segmentum. All the other top forces had to obey them. No wonder the youth dared to act so presumptuously. His first words upon seeing their arrival were that they were disturbing his cultivation. "Could I trouble you, elder, to send the members of this realm to the side?" asked Futian. Ren Huangchen nodded in acknowledgement. Immediately, his will enveloped the entire realm. In an instant, all the cultivators in the realm felt a formless pressure acting on them. For them, this pressure was similar to that of a deity. "Be gone," ordered Ren Huangchen. A terrifying, formless power reverberated outwards. At that moment, the cultivators in the realm were sent flying backward by the shockwave. The formless power pushed them to the boundary of the realm. They were kept outside by a gigantic defensive shroud of starlight. This was also to protect them. In the heavens above, Ren Huangchen raised the scepter in his hand. Starlight flashed in his pupils as he stared at the people below. Even the tribulation-level black-robed elder felt a sense of danger at that moment. He could naturally sense how powerful Ren Huangchen was. Someone informed him over transmitted thoughts about the battle at Solar Divine Palace. The expression of the black-robed elder immediately turned much more serious. His black robe rose as the deadly aura around him thickened. "Kill them," ordered Futian. There was resolve in his tone as he said this. These cultivators from the Dark World slaughtered the innocents in the original realm, causing the annihilation of an entire realm. They killed countless lives and destroyed many realms. It was impossible to spare the lives of these cultivators. Futian was determined to kill all of them regardless of their status. Rumble. The terrifying starry divine swords descended from the sky and charged towards the cultivators in the air. The strongest starry divine sword pointed straight at the black-robed elder. The swords plummeted like meteorites. The scene was frightening. The black-robed elder swept a glance up into the sky. Endless dark light gathered in the vast space. A dark giant appeared out of thin air. It was gigantic and was like the deity of the darkness. Many arms extended from the torso of the giant. All the arms attacked at once. Black punches shattered the space and charged towards the divine swords. The two powers collided. Immediately, cracks appeared in the heavens and earth as an unparalleled storm rampaged. Even the giant-level cultivators were knocked back by the shockwave. Only Ren Huangchun and the black-robed elder stood still in the middle of the battlefield. Yi Futian's figure was also sent flying into the distance by the shockwave. However, he looked at the battlefield with a cold gaze and said, "There's no need to look after me. Kill them." All the giant-level figures around him charged in different directions. Top figures from the dark world also emerged from the crowd. In an instant, a terrifying destructive storm erupted in the sky. A massive battle was taking place in the sky above this realm. The scene was more shocking than that when they were at Solar Divine Palace. Kacha. After a short while the earth split apart, and the realm was shattered. It could not withstand the attack of a figure at Ren Huangchen's level. The realm itself was being torn apart. In another location, Yi Futian stood alone in the void. His gaze was fixed on one person. He was staring at the youth, who was previously cultivating on the altar. This person was also the culprit for this massacre of the living beings within the realm. The youth seemed to have noticed something. He glanced at Yi Futian from where he stood. Their gazes met, and the frightening divine light of the great path shot out from their pupils. Boom! Astonishing divine light shot out from Yi Futian's eyes. It attempted to penetrate straight into the consciousness of the other party. It was his eye sorcery. However, the youth's gaze was similarly frightening. As Yi Futian's gaze invaded his own, the silhouette of a reaper appeared in the other party's gaze. It was as though a divine residence was erected within his eyes. The purest power of death lurked within his eyes, blocking off the attack of the invading eye sorcery. The youth's gaze suddenly became even more terrifying. Beams of light of the reaper shot out straight from his eyes. They formed true death currents of the great path, which were extremely pure. They immediately shot towards Yi Futian at astonishing speeds. Yi Futian stood there motionlessly. His body was like that of a divine being. He allowed the death current to invade his body. The divine light of the great path flowed over his figure, and the death currents seemed to be flooded by the light. The death currents could not touch him at all. Currently, the power of Yi Futian's flesh had already reached an incredible stage. The youth frowned. After he arrived in the original realm, he had heard of Yi Futian's name. Rumor has it that this person was very powerful, and was the top figure in the original realm. Even in the divine prefecture, he was a monstrous figure at the very top. There were many legends about him. For example, it was rumored he controlled the corpse of Xinjiao the Great Emperor, and inherited the teachings of Great Emperor Ziwei. However, the youth was similarly a figure whose name was renowned in the dark world. His cultivation plane was also higher than Yi Futian's. Yi Futian was a 7-tier Ren Huang while he was at the 8th tier. The two of them exchanged gazes across space. Then, the youth saw that Yi Futian traversed the space and moved towards him. The youth floated up, and his body became the deathly body of the great path. Dark divine light circulated around him. His dark long hair danced in the wind. He was akin to the reaper. He pointed his finger towards the sky, and immediately the clouds churned, and the wind howled. The entire space was shaking. A boundless deathly imprint appeared in the sky. He then pointed a finger at Yi Futian. The myriads of death currents instantly moved toward Yi Futian. The death currents flooded the sky. It was the purest power of death, seemingly able to annihilate every form of life. Boom! The boundless deathly imprint transformed into a river of death that flooded Yi Futian's body. However, an awe-inspiring halo flowed around Yi Futian's divine body of the great path. Two polar opposite powers, the power of Yin and the power of the sun, flowed on the surface of his body. His body became the way, and the deathly imprint, which came close to his body, was destroyed. The boundless deathly imprint failed to inundate Yi Futian's divine body of the great path. He broke free from the current as the divine light flowed around him. This caused the black-robed youth to frown. Under the attack of his deathly imprint, even an 8th-tier cultivator with a flawless great path would be instantly destroyed. However, Yi Futian's body seemed indestructible and immortal. With the power of Yin and the sun's power, its destructive power was also very frightening. His attack actually did not affect Yi Futian. This caused the black-robed youth to sense a sliver of danger. Buzz! Yi Futian accelerated, descending like a meteorite bathed in flames as he charged towards the black-robed youth. Boom! Astonishing death currents burst forth from the body of the black-robed youth. In an instant, the vast space was buried in the will of death that took the form of a reaper. Its pupils swept towards Yi Futian, who was charging down towards it. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. That I was like the eye of hell. A hell reaper appeared and devoured everything. Limitless death currents swirled towards Yi Futian's body, as if they were tentacles. That I was like the eye of hell. A hell reaper appeared and devoured everything. Limitless death currents swirled towards Yi Futian's body, as if they were tentacles. When the power submerged Yi Futian's body, despite his godlike body, his body still began to corrode while his divine light was suppressed. The death will was eroding into him. It was like Yi Futian had fallen into a divine will domain. Countless illusions of ghosts and deities surrounded the space he was in. It was like true hell, and no end was in sight. Clearly, this black-shirt Run Huang of the 8th plane was not just your ordinary cultivator. He was extremely powerful. Boom! At that moment, a gorgeous diagram suddenly sprouted from Yi Futian's body. It was like a divine diagram of the Great Path. A sun and a moon seemed to surround it. The polarizing power of yin and yang transformed into a yin-yang divine diagram. Moreover, it kept growing bigger and bigger. The frightening power of yin and yang burst from within, and wiped away all the death currents surrounding Yi Futian. It had countered all the demonic powers. A domain, huh? Yi Futian scanned the large Great Path domain. It looked like he was stuck inside it. The yin-yang diagram suddenly became gigantic and floated behind him. The divine fire of the sun and the power of yin swirled out at the same time. Moreover, the yin-yang diagram also contained the mighty sword will, which had been transformed into the sun sword and the shadow sword. Both sword wills darted around him and wiped out all the demons. Then a frightening rumbling filled the air. Under the divine swords of yin and yang, the domain formed by the divine wheel of the Great Path trembled. At that moment, a hell reaper appeared within the domain. It looked just like the youngster. His heart fluctuated slightly as he felt the destructive powers hidden within the yin-yang diagram. These were two extreme powers, the divine power of the sun and the divine power of yin. However, they were both controlled by one person. The young man trained in the purest form of the Great Path of Death. Moreover, his level was higher than Yi Futian's. However, his Great Path was still suppressed by Yi Futian's strength. His body definitely contained some extraordinary divine powers. Then, the horrendous Hell Reaper extended its palm to grab Yi Futian. Multiple horrible marks of the Reaper were within its palm. Through the dark divine light, loud rumbling noises filled the air. Its arm faced upwards, and its palm instantly shrouded the entire space. Escape seemed impossible. Just how strong is the full-powered attack of a Run Huang of the 8th plane? Yi Futian wanted to see just how strong he was. Vong! Divine lights flashed. Yi Futian's divine body of the Great Path shot down. He did not try to dodge and charged straight towards the giant palm of the Hell Reaper that contained multiple marks of the Reaper. Divine lights of yin and yang surrounded Yi Futian's body as he transformed into a sword of the Great Path. At that moment, his body could transform into the Great Path, and with that, all the powers of the Great Path that he wielded would be able to blossom. At that moment his figure, while dashing downward, was more beautiful and attractive than a meteor. The Hell Reaper's giant palm smashed outward and clashed with Yi Futian's body. The marks of the Reaper in the middle of its palm exploded into frightening divine lights of death that sent wild shockwaves toward Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian's body, which had transformed into a sword, was blocked by the Reaper's marks. The destructive light spread toward his surroundings. A crisp crack sounded. Yi Futian's body of the Great Path had become notably darker. However, at that moment, cracks had begun to appear on the marks of the Reaper. The number of cracks increased rapidly, and after a while, They were destroyed and turned into frightening death currents. As for Yi Futian, his body continued to charge downward after he directly punctured the Hell Reaper's arm. Each and every inch of the Reaper's arm where Yi Futian passed by cracked and crumbled. In an instant he had reached his opponent's body. Rumble. The Great Path domain crumbled in that instant. A figure was sent flying outside. The giant Hell Reaper's body was also destroyed. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Yi Futian floated in the sky. While the divine light on his body had dimmed considerably, his image was still breathtaking. Feeling the residual death currents inside his body destroyed by divine powers, Yi Futian could not help but feel somewhat shocked. If it were someone else, they would have most certainly died under the marks of the Reaper. Underneath, the black-shirt youth coughed fresh blood out from his mouth. His face was slightly pale as he raised his head to stare at Yi Futian, who was floating in the sky. In the dark world, he had never suffered such an overwhelming defeat. Moreover, his opponent today was a practitioner whose plane level was below his. Then at that moment, a yin-yang diagram floated in the sky. Divine lights of yin and yang descended simultaneously, shrouding the endless space, including the black-shirt youth's body. The frightening radiance of a divine sword shot downward, in an attempt to annihilate its intended target. As the divine sword closed in to kill the black-shirt youth on the spot, balls of frightening dark clouds suddenly appeared above the youth's head. The clouds rumbled and roared. Then a demonic figure seemed to appear. Black blades of light seemed to appear from within the frightening dark clouds. When the divine sword arrived, it was devoured and had failed to strike its target. Roar! The demonic cloud, carrying the demonic figure within it, flew towards Yi Futian in the sky. In an instant, the entire space looked like it was about to be destroyed. It was a horrifying scene. However, at that same moment, a ray of divine light of space veiled Yi Futian's body. When the demon attempted to devour him, the divine light of space directly transported Yi Futian away. It was Old Ma. At the same time, a powerful heavyweight-level figure also appeared beside the black-shirt youth. Yi Futian's cold glare shifted towards his opponent. He had failed to kill him. He was already able to estimate his combat strength through the battle earlier. With the number of abilities and skills he possessed at that moment, he would dominate his opponent at the 7th plane level. If he were on the 8th plane, even freak show and genius level existences would not be a problem. Since he could defeat the black-shirt youth, Ninghua would most likely not be a problem. Among the giants, he should have already reached the peak. His gaze shifted toward the powerful cultivator who initiated the move earlier. Yi Futian's eyes, which held a murderous aura, exhibited his eagerness to try. He wanted to duke it out with the heavyweight figure. The black-shirt youth stared at Yi Futian. The pride and arrogance that he displayed earlier were no longer evident in his eyes. He completely lost to Yi Futian. If it were not for the support from someone else, he might have died at Yi Futian's hands. Retreat, the black-shirt youth said. He wanted to retreat and temporarily leave this place. The practitioners of the original realm seemed somewhat difficult to deal with. As soon as he spoke, the top figures of the dark world prepared to leave the battlefield. However, when they raised their head, they could only see Yi Futian speaking to Renhuang Chen, who was standing high above in the sky. Seal this realm. Do not let a single person leave. Roger. Renhuang Chen nodded. Then, in an instant, the entire space was shrouded by a frightening light screen. The light screen was surrounded by divine lights of stars, making it look like a real galaxy. The space within had been turned into a starry domain. Unless the starry domain broke, none of their enemies would be able to leave. The youth's gaze turned cold as he saw this unfold before him. The people of the original realm actually wanted to make them stay there. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2281. Support? Chapter 2281. Support come up, said Renhuang Chen, high up in the air. Suddenly, multiple figures charged into the clouds towards the sky. Then, they landed beside Renhuang Chen. They knew what Renhuang Chen wanted to do. At the same time, the cultivators of the opposing side had also gathered together in an area below them. The black-robed elder raised his head to look at Run Huangchun. In the earlier battle, he had already sensed that his opponent's battle strength was above his own, and the scepter in his opponent's hands was also extraordinary. This person was very frightening. Then the starlight screen of the area began to twirl. Countless rays of starlight descended from above. Intense roars rang in the air. After that, blades of starry divine swords emerged high up in the sky. At the same time, as Run Huangchun extended his hand holding the scepter directly connected to the starlight screen and devoured the limitless starlight. After that, everything converged and transformed into a sky-reaching, divine sword that pointed downward. A ray of starlight shot outward into the sky. It was as if all the starlight in the 9 heavens had landed onto the starry light screen and converged into the starry divine sword, making it more powerful. One after another, the gigantic starry divine sword seemed intent on burying the entire world. The top figures of the dark world felt a sense of crisis. Each of them released a frightening power of the great path from their bodies. The incredible existence above who had gone through a tribulation wanted to annihilate them all on the spot. The black-shirt youth's gaze was cold. Aurora of the Reaper shot out from his pupils. In the dark world, the faction he belonged to was one of the best. Apart from the Dark Court and a few other factions, no one else would dare to act so impudently in front of them, not to mention the fact that they were trying to kill them. Now, in this land within the Void Realm, which had long become abject, there was actually a faction that intended to destroy them. The black-robed elder had a solemn expression on his face. He stood in front of the youth. The cultivators of the dark world also gathered behind him. Then his black robe fluttered, and a frightening aura burst from his body. It seemed as if black clouds had covered the sky and blocked out the starlight. A world of inferno seemed to have emerged in this space and covered the vast sky and boundless land. It also seemed to want to devour Run Huangchun and the others in the sky. Inside this space, multiple shadows of demons and ghosts appeared. They held dark spears, crimson-colored demonic hammers, reaper sickles, and many others. It looked like the real hell. There was also a frightening light of catastrophe blinking. It was the light of catastrophe from the Reaper. It crushed anything in its path. A frightening treasure also appeared in front of the black-robed elder. It looked like it was crafted from a divine wheel of the great path. A powerful and frightening power seemed to be propagating within it. The light of catastrophe flashed incessantly. It looked like a mighty dark magic item had been smelted into his divine wheel of the great path. They had merged into one, and it was extremely powerful. Kill! Run Huangchun shouted from the sky. Suddenly, the endless starry divine light swept past the darkness. With vast and mighty world-destroying strength, it shot downward. Frightening sounds of rumbling filled the skies. The starry divine swords pierced through heaven and earth. Accompanied by the descent of the blinding divine light, the sword shot toward the cultivators of the dark world. All the cultivators of the dark world released intimidating power of the great path as they prepared to block it. The strongest person was naturally the black-robed elder, who blocked the attack right in front of him. When the starry divine swords pierced into the space of inferno, the demons and ghosts directly slammed into them. Blades of light of catastrophe also shot towards them. In an instant, heaven and earth seemed to crumble as a devastating and destructive storm appeared within the space of inferno. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The starry divine sword in the middle contained the greatest might. It shot downward. Demons and ghosts were directly punctured and destroyed. They could not block it at all. This was also the sword that killed the tribulation-level existence on Sun God Mountain in the past. One could only imagine just how scary it was. Boom! The sword smashed into its enemy. Like a god stopping a godslayer, the sword directly shot towards the cultivators below. The black-robed elder had a solemn expression. He threw the black alms bowl in his hand into the sky. Suddenly, the black alms bowl transformed into a separate space that devoured everything. The gigantic starry divine sword was actually devoured by this black alms bowl. Then inside the bowl, the starry divine light and destructive dark divine light exploded at the same time. Loud sounds of explosions continuously came from within. The black alms trembled violently. The black-robed elder raised an arm and held the black alms bowl. A surge of the power of the Great Path flowed into the bowl. The dark energy in the surrounding area also surged crazily into the bowl, as if trying to devour all power of the Great Path. The shaking became more and more violent. 2 rays of divine light turned around and shot upwards into the sky. A ray of starry divine light. A ray of destructive light of catastrophe. They were interwoven together. In the sky, Ren Huangqin's purple robe also began to flutter. He extended his foot forward. Divine powers poured into the scepter in his hand from below. Then a loud explosion ensued. A loud and violent sound came from the black alms bowl. The black-robed elder could be heard letting out a slight grunt. After that, vague sounds of something breaking and cracking could be heard. Then, many people were surprised to find out that underneath the giant black alms bowl, cracks had appeared. Blades of frightening starry divine light leaked from within. It was as if they were going to burst out from there at any moment. The black-robed elder's black robe expanded. He raised his hand to point at the black alms bowl. Then a more powerful divine power of the Great Path seemed to surge into it. 2 types of auras crashed and collided with each other within. Boom! A powerful blast rang in the air. The black alms bowl finally burst open. The black-robed elder spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His aura had also weakened significantly. However, even though the black alms bowl was broken, the starry divine sword was also destroyed. It did not continue homing in to kill its target. He destroyed a divine wheel of the Great Path. The hearts of many cultivators from the dark world beat violently. That was a tribulation-level existence. He was actually pushed into this state. He had one divine wheel of the Great Path destroyed, and he also suffered severe injuries. It looked like it would be near impossible for him to recover. This strike was enough to diminish the prospects of this black-robed elder. It seemed like he couldn't progress even a step further. His cultivation could even deteriorate. However, at that moment, it was not time yet to think about such things. Right then, they did not even know if they would be able to get out of there alive, much less think about anything related to the future. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Starry divine lights began to converge again. In the sky, the starlight screen continued to breed devastating powers. It looked like it would not stop until they were annihilated. The cultivators from the dark world knew that they had encountered someone extremely difficult this time. They were actually going to kill them for a few commoners of some realms. Bang! However, at that moment, the starlight screen suddenly shook violently. The space they were in was already sealed. However, for such violent shaking to occur, it was clear that someone was attacking from the outside. Ren Huangqin spread his divine consciousness outside the sealed territory and saw that many cultivators had appeared. Then another loud bang. Multiple cracks appeared on the starlight screen. After that it broke. High in the sky, from multiple different directions, cultivators stood tall and proud. The auras emanating from their bodies were frightening. They were all top-level cultivators. Seeing the scene before them, light returned to the eyes of the dark world cultivators below. Someone had come to support them. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Ren Huangqin focused on the cultivators who appeared, only to see one of them stepping forward at this moment. The aura permeated from the man was terrifying, as he was also an existence of the tribulation level. The other cultivators who with him also possessed an aura that was equally as frightening. Ren Huangqin focused on the cultivators who appeared, only to see one of them stepping forward at this moment. The aura permeated from the man was terrifying, as he was also an existence of the tribulation level. The other cultivators who with him also possessed an aura that was equally as frightening. These people were from the dark world. They recognized Futian and his party. Almost all the top cultivators from the original realm had participated in that battle at Heavenly Mandate Academy. Only those who descended on the original realm later did not witness what took place during the battle. Even so, they had heard about Futian and Ziwei Segmentum. The cultivators from Dark Court, Futian marveled that powerful existence who came forward may be from the Dark Court. Like the imperial palace in Divine Prefecture, the Dark Court was a ruling power in the Dark World. It had an unknown number of cultivators who possessed unimaginable prowess. Gai Qiong, who was killed by Yi Futian, was one of Divine Prefecture's divine generals. Of course, in the imperial palace of Divine Prefecture, there was no lack of individuals with this cultivation level, and the Dark Court was no exception. This powerful existence who had arrived was one of the cultivators presided over the 8 thrones in the Dark Court, a supreme existence ranked close to the top, the Infernal King himself. The reason for the Infernal King to come in person was because he had an extraordinary relationship with this young man in black. He came from the same bloodline as the young man, and later became a cultivator on the throne, after he had entered the Dark Court to cultivate. In the cultivation world, anyone who had passed the divine tribulation of the Great Path was regarded as a supreme cultivator. In Ziwei Segmentum, aside from the previous palace lord, only Ren Huangchun was a cultivator of the tribulation level. Donghua domain in which Yi Futian had cultivated before Emperor Shi. It was rumored that only the domain chief of Donghua domain had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. And the domain chief of the domain chief's manor was a supreme being who could rule in the stead of the great emperor if need be. Therefore, cultivators of the tribulation level were highly regarded. The fact that a supreme existence of tribulation level was willing to protect the young man in black called the young man's background into question. It was not hard to imagine from what great force was he originated. This was also the consensus between Yi Futian and the others. In truth, the youth in black came from one of the top principalities in the Dark World, the Infernal Clan, which ruled boundless territory within the Dark World. Legend had it that in the ancient times, the clan had godlike cultivators passing down their inheritance until this day. However, the true depth of their strength was unfathomable. The Infernal Clan had produced many extraordinary figures for the Dark World. Among them, the Infernal King was the most excellent. When he was appointed, he was named the Infernal King, the master of the Infernal Throne. Strictly speaking, the Infernal King was the junior brother of the current clan leader of the Infernal Clan. Therefore, the young man in black should be addressing him as Uncle Master. It was not hard to deduce the status of the young man in black in the Dark World. This was why he acted so recklessly when he reached the original realm, refining the vitality of other cultivators for his own gain with impunity, destroying the realm at every chance he had. The Infernal King's eyes were indifferent, and a chill shrouded this space. He was the top 3 existence among the 8 kings of the Dark Court. In addition to the 2 top cultivators among the 8 kings, there were also individual supreme existences above the 8 kings, as well as that old monster who had previously hidden in the shadows. His status could be considered as being at the very peak of all existence. Their entry to the original realm this time was supervised by him. In addition to the battle at the Heavenly Mandate Academy last time, the Dark World had sent a cultivator who had passed the second divine tribulation. On the outside, it appeared that he commanded all the cultivators of the Dark World in the original realm. Uncle Master. Yi Futian's eyes sharpened when he heard the young man in black calling out to the Infernal King. His eyes swept toward the Infernal King and the youth in black. Was this young man have some direct connection with the Dark Court? No wonder he was so brazen to kill without discrimination. The Infernal King nodded slightly, but the look on his face was gloomy. His eyes swept over at Yi Futian and the others coldly, and there was a strong murderous intent in his heart. However, he was also a little apprehensive, so he did not dare to attack Yi Futian outright. After all, the memory of that battle was still fresh in his mind. The teacher who came to this world may be of the Imperial realm, and they couldn't afford to offend someone at this level. Remember what kind of character the Saint Emperor of the Holy Land of Taichu was? A supreme being who had passed the second divine tribulation of the Great Path, was comparable to his senior brother's position as the clan leader of Infernal Clan in the Dark World. Divine Prefecture aside, even in the entire world, such a person was at the top of all existences. A person at this level was almost killed on the spot. If it weren't for the opponent's mercy, he would have been killed most unceremoniously with great embarrassment to boot. Yi Futian, now, was regarded as one of the thorniest characters who could not be provoked, at least in the land of the original realm. So it was best not to touch him. Anything that happened to Yi Futian would anger that mysterious but supreme existence, and they would not be able to stay in the original realm. Let me settle the matter by taking him away. What do you say? The Infernal King proposed while looking at Yi Futian. His group was actually a bit stronger in strength, but he didn't dare to touch Yi Futian carelessly. At the moment, several existences of the Imperial Realm had reached a tacit agreement with one another, achieving a state of balance. If the teacher was truly a hidden figure of the Imperial Realm, any provocations might have unforeseeable consequences, and even he would not be able to bear the responsibility. Therefore, even the Infernal King had his concerns. Uncle Master. The young man in black looked at the Infernal King questioningly. Would they let him go? The powerful existence among them, who was of the tribulation level, had lost his divine wheel of the great path. If it weren't for the Infernal King and the others who arrived in time, Yi Futian and the others would have killed and destroyed them right here. And now to spare them? To let the whole matter go? Even though he had heard of that battle, could there really be someone of the Imperial Realm? Even if someone of the Imperial Realm were really to intervene, wouldn't the Master of the Dark Court come in person? Obviously, as someone merely cultivating in the Infernal Clan, he did not have as many concerns as the Infernal King. After all, their responsibilities were different. The Infernal King was responsible for the entire situation. Likewise, Yi Futian could never allow the Infernal King to take the young man away. His eyes showed indifference. This man was a menace in the original realm, killed and slaughtered at will at every turn to bring hell on earth, causing many to lose their lives. How could he let him go just like that? Can you leave him? Yi Futian pointed to the young man in black and replied. He could see that the cultivators from the dark world didn't want to offend him, and that was why he proposed that he would drop the matter when he could take the young man with him. At any rate, this blood debt must be repaid. The dark eyes of the Infernal King looked at Yi Futian, revealing a mighty and coercive spirit upon his person, exerting a tremendous sense of oppression on him. He thought he had already conceded quite a lot to Yi Futian. As the Infernal King, he didn't pursue this matter further, and was willing to let the whole thing go as long as he could take his people away. But Yi Futian refused to give up, and demanded him to hand over the young man. Ren Huangchen's figure appeared in front of Yi Futian, the scepter in his hand covered in brilliant light, releasing wisps of starry divine light. A powerful pressure was now released toward the Infernal King, as he could faintly detect that the strength of the Infernal King was above the old man in the black robe. If there was a battle, they had no advantage to speak of. They may want to detain these people, but it would be difficult. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2283, Thoughts. Chapter 2283, Thoughts. No. The Infernal King stared at Yi Futian and refused. A mighty pressure permeated the atmosphere, colliding with the aura of Ren Huangchen. Ren Huangchen might be strong, but as the number 3 person presiding over the 8 thrones of the Dark Court, he was not afraid of Ren Huangchen. He didn't attack Yi Futian because he had some reservations regarding that mysterious teacher, not because of Yi Futian himself or any of these cultivators from Heavenly Mandate Academy. Otherwise, he would have already gone to war with them. As a cultivator from the Dark Court, and as the master of the Infernal Throne, apart from those who had survived the Second Divine Tribulation, and the Emperor of the Highest, not many others could scare him. As for his nephew, how could he hand him over? Whether it was from the standpoint of the Dark Court, or the standpoint of the clan, if he had handed his nephew over today, wouldn't that mean the Dark Court was in fear of a junior figure? And how would he explain this to his senior brother? In the Dark World, his senior brother, the clan leader of the Infernal Clan, was in existence with transcendent status. Clearly Yi Futian felt the aura from the Infernal King. He knew it was highly improbable for this master of a throne from the Dark Court to relinquish the guilty party to him. Surveying the situation, and judging from the makeup of the cultivators present at the moment, The Dark Court was a few degrees stronger than they were. If they started a war, they could have a high chance of losing. He glanced at the young man in black in the sky below, and his murderous intention was stronger still. "This is not over yet," said Yi Futian coldly. He then looked at the Infernal King and said, "Please leave, all of you." The Infernal King knew what Yi Futian meant. Obviously, the matter would not end there, and he was not so quick to write this off, but he was constrained by the current circumstances to let them go. In the future, he would find a way to execute his nephew. Even though you have powerful backings, you need to recognize who are the masters of this world, said the Infernal King. He then waved his hand, beckoning his people to go. The master of the Divine Prefecture, such as Dong Huang the Great, the master of the Dark Court, the evil emperor of the empty divine realm, and several other supreme cultivators, were considered the true masters of this world. Perhaps there was someone behind Yi Futian, who was on the level of the great emperor. But if he was foolish enough to declare war on the dark world, then the master of the Dark Court himself may get involved personally. Before leaving, the young man in black looked at Yi Futian coldly, as well as that strong cultivator whose divine wheel of the great path had been shattered. Both left with reluctance. They came from the infernal clan, and were humiliated in the land of the original realm. If it weren't for the intervention of the Infernal King, they would have died here. This was such an unbearable disgrace. In the distance, dark currents tumbled and roared. Soon those men disappeared. Watching them leave, Yi Futian retracted his focus. Although he was now in the realm of Upper Renhuang, and his combat power had reached the level of near invincible, just a hair beneath those major figureheads, he was still a little behind if he wanted to contend with the peak forces in this world. Let's first settle the cultivators from this world first, and take them to other domains, said Yi Futian. This domain had been destroyed by this great battle, and had previously experienced unprecedented bloodbath. It was no longer suitable for any cultivators to remain here. Yes, someone nodded next to him. The Crimson Dragon Emperor, who stood behind him, was deep in his thoughts. Yi Futian had done a lot already. For the people of the lower worlds, he almost wiped out the cultivators from a superpower in the dark world. If it were not for the arrival of the Infernal King at the last minute, these invaders would probably die right here. However, this time their opponent was the dark world, and the strength of the original realm was still lesser. If their opponent unified and combined all the forces of the dark world, it would not be something that the original realm, or their ally, could hope to contend. The Heavenly Mandate Academy is still not strong enough, Yi Futian said in a low voice, looking at the carnage that was left behind. He felt sorry that he was unable to detain the guilty party successfully. At present, the strength of the Heavenly Mandate Academy was not enough to protect the 3,000 realms of the Great Path and save it from catastrophes. This is not something that can be changed overnight. After all, the Dark Court itself had gotten involved, said the Sky River Great Elder, who was next to him. What's more, the young man called the Infernal King Uncle Master, so they must have some special relationship. If you want war, Heavenly Mandate Academy has to face the dark world. Although the Academy is much stronger today, it has no way to compete with the dark world and the power hidden within its shadows. Yi Futian certainly understood that the dark world was a force comparable to that of Divine Prefecture. And how strong was the Divine Prefecture? In the land of the 18 domains, the power of any one domain was already extraordinary enough. The sum of all 18 domains would be beyond even the wildest imagination. With the power of the Imperial Palace to boot, it was something terrifying. More recently, the Heavenly Mandate Academy's foundation was bolstered by the cultivators from Ziwei Segmentum. Otherwise, even if all the top forces in the original realm were to unite, the Heavenly Mandate Academy would not be taken seriously by anyone. If we want to contend with the dark world, we have to join forces with the Divine Prefecture. Emperor Nan said, "It's just that each of the forces in the Divine Prefecture has their own ideas and issues, and they divided by many internal disputes. When many forces fought against you and tried to unite Divine Prefecture, we saw how difficult it was. But perhaps we can start with some of the forces and convinced them to develop an alliance with Heavenly Mandate Academy first. I understand. Yi Futian nodded. He understood what Emperor Nan meant. In that battle once upon a time, several major principalities stood by his side, such as Lord Luo from Outer Violet Heaven, and the Sword Goddess from the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow in the Donghua domain. These forces had remained friendly with him after the battle, and might enter the Starry Cultivation Court in Ziwei Segmentum, by way of Heavenly Mandate Academy at any time. Princess Donghuang is already in the lower worlds. She should have the ability to clean up and consolidate the powers in the Divine Prefecture, said Yi Futian. The Divine Prefecture is a little different. Except for the domain chief's manor of the 18 domains, the Imperial Palace does not directly control the top principalities of the Divine Prefecture. Unless there is a real chance for war, the Imperial Palace probably will not order them to do anything, Emperor Nan responded. That's true enough, Yi Futian responded. He had fallen into contemplation. In the land of the 18 domains, each domain chief's manor held great influence. However, when it came to forging a relationship with the Donghua domain and the Shangqing domain, the two domains he had personal experience with, his relationship with these two domain chiefs' manors was not excellent. The domain chief's manor in the Donghua domain wanted to get rid of him for a long time now, and the domain chief's manor in the Shangqing domain wanted to control him. Let's go back first, Yi Futian proposed, and everyone nodded in agreement. There was no sense for them to stay here after the cultivators of this world had left. Then, the group levitated in the air to depart. In the void, Yi Futian looked down to survey the destruction of the realm, which fed the murderous intent that was still blazing in his heart as his eyes drifted somewhere far away. Emperor Nan's words reminded him that he really must strengthen the power of the original realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Yi Futian and the others returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but the whole affair was far from over. The murderers who had ravaged the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were not apprehended and punished. Instead, they were brought back by the Dark World. Yi Futian and the others returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but the whole affair was far from over. The murderers who had ravaged the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were not apprehended and punished. Instead, they were brought back by the Dark World. This matter, of course, was not over. However, the battle that took place in the lower worlds had created quite a lot of waves. Cultivators in both Divine Prefecture and the Dark World noticed the news, and all the principalities were on high alert. Although Yi Futian did not fulfill his promises, at the very least, he was working hard on making them a reality. Had it not been for the Infernal King arriving in person from the Dark Court just in time, perhaps Yi Futian would have already killed those cultivators who brought terror to the lower worlds. It was said that they were the cultivators from the Infernal Clan, a peak principality of the Dark World. In that battle, a cultivator of the tribulation level had his divine wheel of the Great Path crushed, which spoke volumes of the Heavenly Mandate Academy's resolve. As such, even though Yi Futian was not able to fulfill his promise for the time being, the cultivators from various forces in the Dark World would do well to remember the trouble they got themselves in and no longer dare to wreak havoc in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. In reality, how many of them dared to compare themselves with the Infernal Clan? Furthermore, if something happened to them, the Infernal King may not arrive in time to rescue them. After all, the Infernal King himself was a cultivator from the Infernal Clan. Likewise, the forces in the Divine Prefecture were aware of Yi Futian's determination. The Heavenly Mandate Academy, an ally, was actively fulfilling the promise made by Yi Futian to guard the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, not to control it. But for this, Yi Futian and the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy, who had participated in that battle, were greatly dissatisfied. They had witnessed the cruelty and bloodlust of their opponents. They had destroyed the realm and rendered it an inferno on earth. However, these killers left with their lives, which of course was much to their chagrin. In the starry sky world, there were many top cultivators at Ziwei the Great's cultivating court. In addition to the many powerful men from Heavenly Mandate Academy, some forces represented the divine prefecture. For example, the cultivators from the ancient royal family of Duan, the cultivators from the divine palace of Fluttering Snow, and the father and daughter duo of Lord Luo and Luo Su from Outer Violet Heaven were all in attendance. Emperor Shi, thunder-punishing Skylord, the Millet Emperor Li Changsheng, and the others had been comprehending the mystery of this starry sky all along to see if they could comprehend something from it. After all, the great emperor was an irresistible allure for any top-level cultivators. They hoped that in perceiving the meaning of the great emperor, they might have the opportunity to explore the mystery of a higher realm. At this time, Yi Futian and the others had returned as well. Although they were eager for revenge, Yi Futian understood the situation clearly. He knew the limit of his own strength. What could he use to attack the forces in the dark world? The strength of Heavenly Mandate Academy was far from enough. Emperor Yi. At this moment, in the starry sky, several beautiful ladies turned to look at Yi Futian. They were the three goddesses from the divine palace of Fluttering Snow, Qin Qing, Jiang Yueli, and Chu Hanxi. The sword goddess was not far in the sky above them. She was comprehending the will hidden within this starry sky world. The higher a person's realm, the more they could sense that unfathomable aura. Vaguely, they could perceive that this starry sky seemed to be transformed by the will of the gods in heaven. Although they were not able to detect anything solid, it did bring them some insights. For some lucky person, perhaps an epiphany could be experienced. Yi Futian nodded to the goddesses, then said to Jiang Yueli, Goddess Yueli has been in the 8th realm for many years, and is the existence closest to the peak of Renhuang. I wonder if this starry sky world could help the goddess take that one last step. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult than that. Jiang Yueli smiled gently while looking at Yi Futian. She said, This last step is also the most difficult step to take. Once this step is taken, one then embarks on the path to higher pursuits. However, under this starry sky, a mysterious and unpredictable power is perceived. I hope I could comprehend something from it. She then smiled and continued as if she had remembered something. Don't keep talking about me. When I saw Emperor Yi last, I never thought that your strength would grow so rapidly. Today your combat effectiveness should be well above mine. Yi Futian's growth was indeed frightening. In her eyes, he was still a young genius talent who used to tag along with Li Changxing and Zhong Chan. However, now he was stranger than her even if he was behind in realm. Goddess Yueli is overly modest. I am only in the 7th realm, quite a bit below the goddess still, Yi Futian replied. Next to them, Qin Qing and Chu Hanxi were both astounded by Yi Futian's growth. They knew that their senior sister was right. Yi Futian's combat effectiveness was already far above them. Now, other than the major figureheads, it's hard for anyone to compete with him. Once upon a time, he was chased and threatened by Ning Hua, who did everything to suppress him. But today, if the two were to meet again in battle, Ning Hua probably wouldn't be able to defeat Yi Futian. Whatever power that the goddesses want to perceive, I can urge the divine power of the starry sky, so that the goddesses may perceive it more clearly, said Yi Futian. The three of them were speechless when they heard what he said. It seemed that Yi Futian was in full control of this starry sky world. At this time, the sword goddess, who was above in the sky, came over to Yi Futian and said, Is the will of Ziwei the Great still in this starry sky world? Yi Futian bowed slightly toward the sword goddess, extremely courteous, and replied, To answer Elder's question, the will of Ziwei the Great has been completely integrated with this starry sky world. As long as this starry sky world exists, then the will of the great emperor exists with it also, unless the starry sky world is vanquished somehow. However, what kind of tribulation would be able to vanquish this world? That would probably be something that requires the intervention from the great emperor. Here he could leverage the starry sky in battle. Back then, even the original palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace was killed by him when he leveraged this power. Therefore, only the likes of the great emperor might stand a chance to destroy this starry sky. Anyone else would perish. The sword goddess nodded gently and understood everything. This was probably the reason why she had sensed a mysterious and unpredictable force in this starry sky. May I perceive it a little more clearly? The sword goddess asked. Of course, replied Futian. Elder, please follow me. Well then. The sword goddess nodded as the two moved higher up. The face of Ziwei the Great was still there, and they appeared just under that massive visage. Futian looked up at the starry sky, and the boundless sky suddenly brightened up a few degrees more. As the stars shone, the infinite divine glory of the stars showered upon the sword goddess, who was beside him. At this moment, the sword goddess raised her head to look at the starry sky. She stretched out her hand to touch the starlight, and that feeling became even stronger. Many cultivators now looked at them and marveled at Futian's absolute control over this starry sky. A turn of his thought could attract the divine glory of the starry sky. Even the will of the great emperor could be summoned. After a long while, the sword goddess said to Futian, "Thank you very much. Elder is being too formal." As Futian moved his thoughts, the starry divine light gradually dissipated. He continued, "In this starry sky world, aside from these imperial stars, many stars contain some type of particular powers, suitable for many in the Runhuang realm to comprehend. However, this was not necessary for someone like yourself and your realm. However, if you agree, people from Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow may come here to cultivate, and use this place as a place for cultivation." The sword goddess stared at Futian, wondering if he meant for the cultivators of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow to cultivate here. Once he saw the sharpness in her eyes, Futian continued, "The Heavenly Mandate Academy could be an ally with Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow. Now that chaos reign over the original realm, sooner or later, it will spread to the Divine Prefecture and the rest of the world." The sword goddess understood Futian's meaning instantly. While her eyes were still fastened on Futian, she then nodded and said, "Very well." Clearly, she was willing to accept him as an ally. In fact, she was very optimistic about Futian's future prospects. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.